Fied. The thoughts, views, and comments expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production of Glory 93.9 FM.
Today can be the turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street.
Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women.
Wardrobe provided by Bahari Bahamas. Visit shopbahari.com. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I am your host, Michelle Malcolm, and as always, it's a pleasure to be in your company today. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you are listening in by radio or tune in or Facebook or YouTube. We just want to say thanks so much for being a part of the show today. And so today it's all about money. The topic of the show is Money Matters, the state of the economy. And my guest today is someone who can speak authoritatively on the state of our economy because he is the financial secretary to the government of the Bahamas. And I would like to, at this moment, say thank you for being here and welcome to the show, Mr. Marlon Johnson. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Good. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because there are so many questions that need to be answered. And I'm not so convinced that the government is doing a great job in terms of providing the answers that people have questions to. And so I'm hoping that you'll be able to clarify a lot of stuff for us today as it relates to our economy. And I want this to be a conversation that we just get at it. You know what I mean? We only got a 2-hour show, and 2 hours sounds like a long time, but it goes by very, very quickly. And so I want us to just get right into it and really get some questions answered for the Bahamian people. So the first thing I want to touch on is the Economic Recovery Committee, which you headed. We were all, expecting this committee to provide the answers that we needed as it relates to an economic stimulus. And there was a lot of fanfare surrounding this committee. We were told that they would provide a report by September of last year. Eventually, we got a synopsis, but we never received a full report. And every time the Prime Minister speaks about the results of your work, we keep hearing the report is coming, the report is coming, the report is coming. From September to now, we are now, for all intents and purposes, it's May, because it's just, 2 days left, today and tomorrow, in the month of April. So you're looking September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, 8 months. And we have yet to see a full report. What gives?
Yeah, well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. We have delivered the full report to the Office of the Prime Minister, and it's under review of the government.
And
Well, it's up. Our remit is to provide the report to the government.
yes, and I'm not blaming you.
done.
You did your job. I'm not blaming you. But you are also the financial secretary sitting in this seat. So the question is, how long does it take for you to review a report? We're going on 9 months now.
Well, I think that's a question you have to ask the policymakers, because we would have provided the report to them.
All right, Marlon. I guess you could only answer what you could answer, eh? All right.
But that's a factual answer.
Yeah, it is. It is. It still doesn't give us any comfort as to why, going on 9 months, we have yet to receive a full report from the work that you and your team did. I think it is ludicrous. But again, you did your job. I give you that. You did what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And now we have to just, wait, I guess, continue to wait. But I want to talk about some of the things that you were specifically charged with as the head of that committee, because the Prime Minister charged the committee. He wanted you to provide information as it relates to 6 economic models. We were talking the green economy, the blue economy, the orange economy, the digital economy, the knowledge economy, and the conceptual economy. So this is what you guys were instructed to come back with, plans as it relates to those 6 models. I'd like you to explain, if you can, what these models are for those who may not be familiar with what they are. I mean, in a nutshell, and what is the government? How is the government? What is the government targeting for growth in each of those 6 models?
Well, I am not knowledgeable of the six models, so I'm getting feedback in my headphones. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know if we're getting feedback. We're not hearing it on this end, but sometimes that happens, and then we hear it in the playback. Are you on earphones?
Yeah, that's why I moved the earphones specifically. Okay, now it's going to be.
Okay.
So we provided very early on in the process what our remit was. I don't recall us speaking to 6 models, as you say, but we did do a preview saying how we would provide recommendations to create a resilient, a dynamic, a sustainable, and a robust, I think, economy. So what you see that we put back in our summary report reflected the very remit that we were given and the very outline that we promised to the policymakers that was approved and that was returned. It did touch on elements around things like the blue economy, what we do in our oceans. It did speak to the orange economy, but we weren't modeled on the 6 models. I'm not familiar with that terminology and that remit, but we did early on, it's online, point out what our remit was, what our outline was, and we delivered based on that. So I can't speak to those six specific points, but I can speak to the elements that are in the report or the elements that we were tasked to do.
Okay, so can you then explain to us again the question of what is the government's target for growth and the aspects that you can speak to?
So again, the government didn't have a specific target for growth. What the government tasked the ERC to do was to look at, in very broad sense, what are the things that could happen to initially ensure that we do as much best as we could, given the economic circumstances, meaning that we do as much as we could to provide recommendations to see what we could do to mitigate the fallout because of the COVID and, of course, the Orient. And then secondly, the second element of that was to see what were those things that could be a catalyst to allow us to rebound strongly as the pandemic subsided. That was the broad remit of the committee, and those were the basis of the recommendations. So it was to look at accepting an economic reality where you would have muted growth while the pandemic is going on, and to ensure that the government do as much as it can to mitigate those elements. And then secondarily, as we emerge from that, what are the things that we needed to do as a country to ensure that we grow as quickly as we can and as in a sustained way as we can, and leading out of that. So those were the things that informed the work that we would have done, that you would have seen at least in the summary report and the recommendations that were therein. The goal is to grow as much as we can. what the Ministry of Finance, making use of statistics and studies from the IMF, the Central Bank, and the like, is predicting that during 2020, the economy will grow by 2.2% after having contracted 16% last year. And what we are seeking to do is to ensure that we make that growth target and that in the outer years, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get to a point where we have sustained economic growth and we do not repeat what happened in the decade after the Great Recession in 2008, where we had a decade of zero or very little growth. So that is the context in which we provided our recommendations, and that is the context in which we're working here at the Ministry of Finance to do the things that support us being able to recover as quickly as possible.
Okay, and during the course of the show, I want us to really go down into the details of exactly how that's going to happen.
Okay.
I want to talk about the potential that the recommendations that you made in your report. I want to talk about the potential to employ Bahamians, and more specifically, what you recommended, or what, as far as you're aware, as the financial secretary, is the plan of the government to ensure that there is more ownership of Bahamians in that plan.
So those are two distinct questions. One is around employment, one is around ownership. They're related, but they're not the same.
Right.
In order to one of the key things that came out of our recommendation, and similar to what the Ministry of Finance and others recommended, is that the government do as much as it can during the economic downturn to retain employment. So what the ERC would have recommended and what the government did accept was those mechanisms that could retain employment. One was to ensure that it does that as much as it can to keep the government employment levels steady, that it subsidized the Bahamas Airs, the water and sewage, it kept the payroll there to keep people employed. Secondly, it was to ensure that there are direct mechanisms, such as the government tax credit program, whereby the government allowed businesses to keep a portion of their VAT and their business license receipts in order to keep people employed. That tax credit program ended up helping private sector employees make use of VAT receipts and business licenses to keep around 15,000 people employed during the worst of the downturn between the period of July and December at a cost of around $43 million in revenue foregone. So that was a part of the recommendations that was accepted in the near term to try to keep employment levels steady. The other recommendation that we made was that the government do as much as it can on the capital side, on small capital projects, so that it could do as much as possible to keep, and not just keeping the standard works, whether it's repairs of schools, whether it's the construction of sidewalks, rehabilitation of small spaces, to get monies down to the small level contractor who would hire 5, 10 guys, young ladies to work and keep them going. So, and of course, the small business continuity loans, which I think was probably about $36 million or so, maybe a little bit more now, that have spent, I think close to over 450 businesses would have benefited from that as a means for them to be able to stay in business and keep people employed. So the employment scales was one of those direct things that the government could have done and did do to keep people employed. Now, emerging out of the recession, the question now is, how do you keep that momentum going? What do you do? The answer, again, that was accepted by the government, is that the monies that were set aside for small businesses in the amount of $50 million in this fiscal year needs to be sustained. Because prior to, we've had successive governments have done some things. I mean, going all the way back to the Pinlan era, have done things through the BDB and others to help provide capital to small business. The ERC's position was that has to be expanded and enhanced. So the government took the step to remove it from about $4 or $5 million a year, which was in itself was more than 4, up to $55 million this fiscal year. And the question is that has to be sustained, because in order to keep employment going, in order to keep ownership going, Bahamian entrepreneurs and small businesses need access to capital. And they need access to capital in several ways, not just in loans. They need it in the form of grants, they need it in the form of equity. So what we would have recommended and what the government did accept is the notion that you can't have ownership if people don't have access to capital. And so to do all of those things to make it happen, and to ensure that when it comes through with its procurement legislation, that there is provisions in there that will set aside certain contracts specifically for small businesses, because as is the experience in other jurisdictions, When you do that and you give access to small business, specific access to procurement, it allows them to move from small business to big business. So those are the things that a government could do to directly affect ownership. The indirect things that the government can do is to ensure that it's easier for entrepreneurs to get in business and stay in business. So there needs to be concerted effort to revamp the investment regime to make it easier for people to get in business so that they're not in a constant battle and tug of war with government entities just trying to get into business. So those are the kinds of things that we would have recommended, and those are the kinds of things that we would put forward. And it has had a substantial impact in the volume and in the number of small businesses that have been impacted today, even though we accept that there's much more that ought to be done.
Well, that was my next question, because how much did you say was injected into this, everything that you just described as it relates to small businesses? You gave us a figure a moment ago. How much did you say it was?
Small business continuity loan, it ended up being around $36 million. This is in the context of, again, successive government spending no more than $2 or $3 million per year. so that $36 million added up probably about 10 years worth, quote unquote, of small business activity. That's just the continuity loans. There's been another set of money that's been done in grants. There's another $43 million in tax credits to deal with employment. So in the suite of things, it's probably close to $100 million in direct support to small businesses since the pandemic began. And it is critical. And we could always argue that it probably should be more, but it is a substantial boost up to what had preceded. And so the recommendation of the ERC is that is the kind of level of intervention that needs to be sustained. And things like the SBDC, the BDB, and those things need to be put on a sustainable footing so that, again, they're not just contingent upon the whims of a specific administration, but that they're capitalized in such a way that they can continue on and to do work independent of the politics of the day.
Well, I'm glad you're acknowledging that we could argue that more should be done. And you know, I really don't, this whole thing of, well, past governments only did this amount. One of the reasons why this government is in power is because it was elected to do better than past governments. So the question I have now is...
But Michelle, so let me just stop and pause there, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not trying to critique any administration. Governments have done something, right? I'm making a point that what is happening now is upward of 10, 15 times what was done before.
I understand.
It's a material incremental step, but it is material, right? And in the context of where we are, the budget, and of course, one of the things that we have to bear in mind and we have to build is the absorptive capacity of the small businesses. So part of what you would see things like the SBDC doing is making sure they do the hand-holding exercises. So for instance, there's a youth empowerment program. Young people need money to get in business too. But what has been discovered year on year is that if you give young people the resources, but because they're just starting on business, and many of them have come from households where there's no culture of entrepreneurship, they need extensive handholding. So instead of now just doing a youth entrepreneur program where they provide resources directly, they're doing a full academic training and mentorship program for a full maybe 8 months or thereabouts, maybe longer, where they hold their hands so that they're building the capacity of our entrepreneurs and our small businesses so that it will allow it to go. So I just want to make that clear point that yes, it's a material expansion of what we see before. And again, if we're able to do it right, and we're able to properly capitalize these entities and to put in place the right kind of independence mechanisms to make them independent, then they can grow on their own merit. The other key thing is how do you marshal the private sector as a part of this? So part of what the SBDC doing, part of the injection is to make sure they have capital and they're able to guarantee loans and arrangements. So a lot of this lending isn't through the SBDC directly. These are banks and small private entities which are on lending the money, but with a guarantee mechanism backstopped by the SBDC to leverage public resources in a more expansive way. So we're starting on that journey, but in a very, very direct and very, very material way.
Yeah, okay. So that is all really well and good, right? You laid it out as to what is being done. But if we look at this in context, if we look at the entire forest and not just the immediate trees around us, we have to question whether or not we have gone far enough. Because quite frankly, we have lost billions of dollars in revenue. And to suggest that, and I'm not saying that you are suggesting it, but to say that, well, we've invested $36 million towards helping small business owners, or even $100 million. I mean, if 36 million could fix could rebuild $1 billion economy, we'd all be millionaires. So clearly that's not enough. So the next question is, what more is being planned to be done?
So again, that we have to look at it in the context of the fact that we are dealing with an economic crisis that's unprecedented. Part of that unprecedented economic crisis was the requirement of the government to borrow over $1 billion to see us through. So the first thing is, when you have a patient that is in dire straits, is to stabilize the patient. That's true in life, it's true in the economy. So you're dealing with it from a situation of triage. We have to stabilize the situation. So that is the context in which this is being done, is what do you do to stabilize the ongoing situation? Now, the question is, what do you do going forward? Is you have to do a combination of things. As I mentioned, we have to address the investment regime. We have to make it easier for entrepreneurs to be able to get into business. Because too often, and I say this as somebody who is responsible for some of it, is that we have to make it so that when people interact with government, what they need to get done is facilitated in as easy and as straightforward a way as possible. That's a big part of the problem. We have entrepreneurs who are ready to go. And again, we have to untangle the public sector and to make it easy for them to do what they need to do. Secondly, we got to get the economy back moving. Part of that is just we got to get vaccinated. Simple as that. The quicker we can get persons vaccinated, the more we can open up the economy. The more we can open up the economy, the more we could just reflate the economy. Once that economy is reflated, then that gives us both the direct revenue to be able to fund a lot of these programs, but more importantly, it creates the commercial opportunities that these entrepreneurs can then take advantage of. Thirdly, one of the great innovations of the last decade is the move into the shared economy. So now, one of the things that has happened is we have thousands of Bahamians who are now in the hospitality business through Airbnb, BBNO, and it creates a wonderful opportunity for ordinary Bahamians, not only by providing those facilities, but providing services to people who live in these vacation home rental properties to be able to get in business. It provides a wonderful opportunity to create opportunities via partnerships for government land to be married with the private sector, know-how and entrepreneurship, so that Bahamians can put up small cottages in the Family Islands, do extensions to their properties here in New Providence, and to actually get into the business at the retail level and become owners in that way. The other key thing is how do we have to create a proper sovereign wealth fund mechanism and a proper investment fund mechanism, so that again, we find a way in a very efficient way, in a very transparent way, to leverage Crown land, public resources, natural resources in a way that can empower everyday Bahamians. So there's a number of things that can be done, but the biggest thing we need to do in the immediate term is we got to get the economy fully open. And in order to get the economy fully open, we all got to do what we need to do, which is to get vaccinated. We get vaccinated, and then we've seen this, Israel, Britain, we've seen it around the world. Once we get to that particular critical mass, we can open up the economy, reflate what we have, and that gives us the means and the opportunities to be able to do a lot more.
Well, you know what it sounds like to me, Marlon? It sounds like to me that this whole push for vaccine is more about economics than it is about science. If we look at what is what took place in the House of Assembly yesterday, for instance, with the Speaker of the House abruptly adjourning the House of Assembly because of the fact that the clerk tested positive for COVID, and yet they decided to continue on as if nothing had happened. No sanitization of the facilities. It makes you wonder what is really going on here. You are fining people $100,000 or close to $100,000 for having an event where people are not following the protocols, and your parliament, you in essence are doing the same thing. So I'm wondering who is going to get charged there. So these are the kinds of things that make people wonder: is this really about economics? You have to do this, as you just said, to get the economy back, or is this about science? How do you respond to that? And then we're going to take a break.
Michelle, I can't respond to a political question. You know that. So you can't ask me that question. But what I can say is this, right? Clearly, the science is clear. And anybody can Google this. The countries which have been able to get a majority of their adult population vaccinated are those countries which have been able to ease restrictions in a way that doesn't create another spike in the COVID. That is the science. So if you want, you ask me, you're talking about the economics. And part of what we need to do, both from a personal safety perspective, to ensure that we're not getting sick and we're not making other people sick, is to be vaccinated. But the other important element to that is that it also positions us to be able to reopen our economy fully. We don't have to get vaccinated in mass. We can take the slow road out of the pandemic and wait till it burns out in a year, 2 years. We've had the Spanish flu as a precedent. We could wait 3 or 4 years. But the truth is, what the experience has been is that, and we've seen it playing out around the world, those countries which can get a majority of their citizens vaccinated can simply open up without consistently going through the spikes and the fallouts. So that is the point I was making, independent of whatever else may be going on in the country.
Well, you know, I'm a certified holistic health coach, so I beg to differ in terms of what is the best approach, because clearly if you got your people healthier, then here's the thing, and I'm not going to go down the road of that discussion because we got too much ground to cover. But here's the thing: 145 million people around the world contracted COVID. Of that number, just over 3 million died, and the majority of the 142 million people who survived did so prior to a vaccine. So clearly, you have an immune system that is able to handle this thing, and if you get your people healthier, that is the part of the conversation that we are not hearing. And I'm not saying that you don't incorporate the vaccine as part of the strategy. All I'm saying is, while we're incorporating that strategy, how about we also incorporate the strategy of getting our people healthier? But this ain't show about vaccine today. We got plenty.
No, but Michelle, let me just say one thing quickly to that. Okay, let's take you at you. We get people healthier. That doesn't include the people who are already healthy, who already have comorbidities, who already have issues that are critical
yes, today. Yes, it does. My point is, you get them healthier.
Yeah, but no. If I have sickle cell, if I have lupus, those are congenital issues that I can't make myself healthier out of. That's the first point.
That's
second. Let me finish the point.
You're misinformed, Marlon. You're misinformed. That is not true.
Michelle, if you start them on a healthy track today, it will take them some time to become healthy. They won't become healthy tomorrow. Do you agree?
I would say 3 months.
Okay, they need 3 months. So the question is, you have a COVID spike today. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, what do you do with that? Also, healthy older people, by virtue of our immune system, when we're older, we're more vulnerable. So you still have to deal with that 3-month window. So the question is, and I'm not arguing against going healthy, but we have a problem.
I'm not arguing against the vaccine. I'm just
so we don't disagree then. Good. We don't disagree.
So all I'm saying, right? So all I'm saying is, don't present this vaccine as your savior. When the truth be told, if you have a comorbidity, if you have a compromised immune system before you take the vaccine and you do nothing to improve that situation, you could very well be one of those breakthrough cases where even after you're fully vaccinated, you still are going to become sick because of the fact that you did nothing to improve your health and immune system. That is what we are not hearing.
What the science has said so far is, out of the 100 million people who have been vaccinated in the U.S., there's been 5,800 breakthrough cases. There's been 74 deaths, I think, based on that. That's the science. So that tells you that even people who had the comorbidities, even when they get sick, they didn't die. And if they did die, they died in infinitesimally small numbers as compared to the general population, where there's still close to 1,000 people dying a day and still close to 70,000 people getting sick from COVID. So without them doing anything else, the vaccination has provided an extraordinary level of protection to people, even who have those comorbidities and even who have those congenital situations. But the long and the short of the point I'm making is this. I'm going to accept your point. We do have to get people healthier. But while we get people healthier, if we want to get the economy to reflate, we have to get the vaccination and we have to encourage people to become vaccinated. That's the only point I'm making.
I hear you, and we stand to disagree, because if I'm a healthy person, I have a great immune system, I don't see why I have to take a vaccine.
Because there are healthy people who are dying, Michelle. You know this. There are people who are perfectly healthy who have gotten the disease and
dying from COVID. And I don't want to go down this road because we got a lot to talk about as far as the economy is concerned.
What about I get it and I pass it on to somebody who does have a comorbidity?
Comorbidities.
Yeah, but what if I get it unhealthy and I pass it on to somebody who has a comorbidity? That's okay then.
No, I didn't say that. And again, I'm not.
But that's why it's important to be vaccinated. But that's why it's important to be vaccinated. Because I even if I get it and I'm healthy and whatnot, I can pass it on to my elderly parents.
But you can pass it on if you get vaccinated as well, Marlon. That doesn't mean you're transmitting the coronavirus.
With one shot, my chances of passing it on, and the studies are there, and I could Google it while you're on the show, goes down by 70%. With just one shot. With 2 shots, it goes down by 90%. So yes, by getting vaccinated, I am substantially diminishing the opportunities for me to pass it on. That's the science.
All right, we're gonna take a break because I don't want us to lose track of where we're supposed to be going in this show. We got a lot of ground to cover as it relates to the economy of the Bahamas. And so we're going to agree to disagree, and we're going to continue the show.
We don't have nothing to disagree on, my dear. The science is the science.
We got a lot to cover. We got a lot to disagree on. So stay with us. This is GPS. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Located on Carmichael Road, Divine Designs Hair Boutique is a haven for women and men looking for professional beauty services. Our state-of-the-art and contemporary equipment creates a relaxing ambiance for you to enjoy while we cater to you. Need a hairstylist? We cater to all types and textures of hair for care and styling. We even have a barber on duty. Need a nail tech? Our technicians provide a range of nail services, including the latest trends. Unwind in one of our massage chairs while you get your pedicure. With our reasonable rates, friendly staff, and over 20 years of experience, you will be in great hands. Call us at 823-1669 or 698-1025 to schedule your appointment. Wanna be pampered? Wanna be slayed? Let Divine Designs make your day.
At Lee Air, safety is our #1 priority. Flying since 1996, we offer scheduled flights into Fresh Creek and Mangrove Key Andros and Great Harbor Key, Berry Island, twice daily, 7 days a week. Affordable charter services are also available to anywhere in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. Lee Air Charter Services. Call 225-3267, 702-7127, or 322-1317 for reservations.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Longevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
And we are back. Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm, and my guest today is the Financial Secretary, Marlon Johnson, and we are talking money matters today, the state of the economy of the Bahamas. Okay, so yesterday, Minister Kwesi Thompson announced that he revealed this establishment of a Bahamas Recovery and Sustainable Growth Project in conjunction with the University of the Bahamas and Shivargo Lang from the Public Policy Institute to examine what is needed to kickstart the economy. So I thought that's what the ERC was supposed to be doing.
So thank you. Let me clarify what the study is. The study is to develop and deepen and expand the economic modeling. And what that means is that they are developing what's called a general equilibrium model. And what that allows us to do, right now we have a model, but we have a simplified model. So what happens is if the government wants to do a tax measure or an employment measure, we do some calculations to try to determine what the impact of that would be in terms of employment, economic growth, economic decline, whatever the situation is. What the University of the Bahamas is doing utilizing some international expertise as well, is helping us to put together a financial and econometrics model so that as the government gets ready to propose any particular policy measure around taxes, around fiscal, around support for small businesses, we'll be able to plug that into the model using all the elements of the economy and make what we hope to be more precise determinations on the impact of any particular measure. It isn't to help inform the policy, the specific policies. It is to say that if the government makes a policy prescription to increase support for this, take away support to that, provide there, this is what the output would be. This is how it would impact the broad economy and specific elements. But it isn't to come up with specific recommendations as to what to do from a policy perspective. So that hopefully that clarifies what the role of this is to do. Moreover, it is to make sure that we have that model and that we can bring back into the Ministry of Finance without training some of our professionals so that again, we can refine it, develop it, and help to underwrite some of the government public policy.
Okay, so how will that work alongside the work that you did as the ERC? How will the two mesh?
So very good question. So within the ERC, and let's say that one of the ERC recommendations was that I used one that wasn't accepted. Let's say the government said, one of the recommendations the ERC said was that for the time being, the government should suspend the $500 allowance for people coming back in. And the impetus of that was to encourage people to shop from home. What the model will do is that if you take that policy and you say, listen, if we put that variable in, reduction in that particular tax concession, what will that mean in terms of additional revenue, in terms of additional consumption in the Bahamas, and employment alike? So that is what that model will do. That model will allow us in a more comprehensive way, adding more variables to predict what the output would be if a government proposes some kind of change. What we generally do now is we have some sort of modeling, but it's still in a very basic way where we do some projections. This would make these projections a lot more robust and help better inform the government policy making. That is what that study and the general equilibrium model is done. We have done it in the country in bits and spurts. The former administration did it, for example, when it was contemplating VAT, and there's been times when it's been done on and off. So what we in the Ministry of Finance wanted to do is we wanted to make that model a permanent element and feature of what we do, and sort of get on the cutting edge of global trends as far as modeling and forecasting is concerned.
Okay. I have a comment from C. Allen Johnson. C. Allen Johnson says, it does not clarify. The University of Bahamas grouping is set to influence policy positions. If it is to verify if it's sound to execute, if you are to predict what will happen, it is to inform policy positions. Double talk again. How do you respond to that?
I don't know what C. Allen is talking about. I just explained what the model is to do. The model, by virtue of what they're helping us do, is to develop and perfect an economic modeling approach, a general equilibrium model. That will then help us to sound off, to test any of the policy projections that we're doing. It is intended to be a tool for our internal use to help us do it. Coming out of that, we may learn some things. We may say, listen, for instance, if we want to provide more money to the small businesses, you put it into the model, and you may get a surprising outcome. Then it'll tell the government that, listen, know what you're thinking about. That doesn't work. You need to try something else, or it may work better than you think. So that is what this model will do. It is a tool. It's one of the tools that will be in our arsenal to help with public policy determination. And so that is what this is about.
Okay. The vast majority of the businesses in the country are all internal. And this means that we're not seeing much new money come into the country from the existing businesses. So what? I'm
sorry, I would just say that they are internal. They're not seeing much money come into the country. Sorry, what do you mean by that?
New money.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's the same money circulating, in other words. So the question I'm asking is, what can we do to stimulate new money coming into the country? What is the plan for that?
I don't understand. Well, maybe I don't understand the terms. When they say the new money, what could we do to bring more dollars into the country is what the question is?
Yes, as opposed to just the same dollars circulating.
So let me clarify something. Basic economic policy says that as long as you have a viable economic entity, you're not just circulating the same money. There's something called the multiplier effect. And anybody who would have studied basic economics would understand that. And that means that when you put somebody in employment, when a small business person gets started, it isn't that even though that they're taking the pot of money and giving it to you, that money is actually multiplying throughout the economy because a portion of the retained spending goes and is invested. So that person hires 5 persons, that one entrepreneur. When they hire 5 persons, that's 5 salaries they go and spend, that helps create jobs. So $1 spent in your economy actually has a multiplier effect. So the SBDC is able to say, for example, for every $1 you spend, that actually equals to $1.4 in the economy. It isn't 1 for 1. So no, the money isn't just recirculating. Every time, even when there's domestic investment, it is expanding the economic pie. That's why even closed economies can grow. So even if an economy that's walled up can grow because of that multiplier effect. So no, I just want to disabuse persons of the notion that it's still the same money. What you want is you want people who have viable ideas to be funded and to get in the business and make it, because by virtue of that activity, they are actually growing the economic part. So let me just clarify that. The question as to how do we get more money in is that we have to be good at the things that we've done and try some new things in order to bring new monies into the economy. What the ERC said, and put on my ERC cap, is that the Bahamas is and remains a destination of choice. But that destination doesn't happen to be limited to traditional tourism. As a destination of choice, there are people who want to come to live here in the Bahamas, who've already made their money, and so there's an opportunity there. There are people who want to come and work from the Bahamas without having to take necessarily a Bahamian job, but just work remotely. There are people who want to come here to do interesting things around farming. There are Bahamians who want to get into the innovative export sectors, into the knowledge economy. We are a destination of choice. So what we have to do is leverage what our advantage is. And that is then what will create the new opportunities. But even as we create the new opportunities, we still have not fully exploited our existing industries. We can do a lot. There's still some opportunities in the financial services sector. There's still some opportunities in the tourism sector. I just talked about the economy. We still have to focus in a different sort of way, I believe, in agriculture and fisheries to better exploit those. So there are some things that we have to do in a better, more focused way. And so those would be the kinds of things that I think we would need to focus on in order to expand the inflow of money into the economy. But I don't want people, one of the lessons of this pandemic has been that even with the shutdown of our primary export sector, tourism, that we still saw quite a bit of dynamism within the Bahamian economy that kept us afloat even when the tourists wasn't coming in. So that entrepreneurial spirit, that resilient spirit still has some substantial ways, I think, to be exploited, to be cultivated and nurtured.
I want to turn our attention to government spending. Mm-hmm. How much money was borrowed by this government in the last 4 years?
The last 4 years, including this year, we're probably up to net new borrowings of around $2 billion or thereabouts.
Okay. And how much money is needed to keep the country afloat between now and, say, the end of the year?
And now, well, our fiscal year, let me frame it this way. Our fiscal year will end in July, and we have budgeted to borrow around $1.3 billion, given that where we are in the pandemic. And in the next fiscal year, based on what we have in our fiscal strategy report, we're projecting about another $900 million or thereabouts in additional borrowing. So that would cover a 24-month period. So it's 1.3 plus 9, about $2.2 billion or so since from July 2020 to June 2022.
Okay, so I know a little small chunk of change. You're talking
it's quite a substantial sum of money.
So, with that in mind, what is the government's plan to cut cost?
Right. So, one of the wonderful things, Michelle, I want all of your listeners to do this. If they go to bahamasbudget.gov.bs, they will see that the government publishes a quarterly report, and every year it publishes a fiscal strategy report. The fiscal strategy report lays out the government's 3-year plan as to what it will do in the ensuing 3 years to manage the finances. So I just say that by way of introduction, that a lot of that answer that question is in that document, that fiscal strategy report, which was just published this past December. What the government has said is a couple of things. One, recognizing that we're in the middle of an economic crisis, that the deficit would expand to help us get through that. But as we emerge from that, to get us back towards fiscal consolidation, what the government has said is that one of the key areas for consolidation is around our transfers to our state-owned enterprises, our state-owned entities. That's the Bahamas, the water and sewages, public health authorities, and the like, and to move them onto a more cost recovery footing, so that the consumers of those products will be the ones who pay for them more directly. And the government has started that journey, even in the middle of the pandemic, with Bahamas Air, which made some adjustments to their tariffs and introduced first bag fee for international flights this past January, and the announcement that after 20 years, the water tariffs will be adjusted. Additionally, those entities will also have to start to look at what they can do for cost containment. So in a very direct way, that's one of the major elements, with a commitment to reduce the cost of those with $100 million over a 3 to 4 year period in subventions. On the public health authority side, it is transitioning to the national health insurance system for primary care, which will mean that the public clinics, when people attend a public clinic, they'll either have to have private insurance or they'll have to have NHI primary care services, and it will force those clinics to start to move to, again, a cost recovery, proper accounting process for their business. So they're going to start to compete with other private primary care providers for customers, and that pilot will kick off in a few months. So to try and, one of the major containment strategies is around containing the growth there. Also, as government services move on, there's a move towards digitization. And what digitization will allow is that as our clerical team staff members, the government public service tends to trend towards being older. As the government digitizes, the need for continuing expanding the headcount will go down, because the number of clerical jobs over time will go away. And as those people retire out of the public service, the need to replace them with additional clerical staff will go down. So that will bring down the cost of actually doing business. So those would be the two of the sort of the digitalization efforts, the reform of the state-owned enterprises, two of the major planks in the government's plan to start to bring down the cost of delivery of government services. That said, I think it's important to point out to your guests that among countries in this hemisphere, we have one of and of comparable levels of development, we have one of the lower levels of public spending as a percentage of GDP, because we have, over the 50-year time period, made it a point to keep to control the growth of our public service. So to us, it's big, because it's 20% of the GDP and 20,000 staff. But in relation to other countries, we have managed to keep our public sector relatively small compared to many of our peers.
Well, we have to talk about that, because one of the elephant in the room as it relates to cutting cost is obviously the question of reducing the workforce. Right. Let's face it, you sent, I would say, a workforce of 42,000 people directly or indirectly related to government. Mm-hmm. You've got the permanent and pensionable workers, you've got casual workers, temporary workers, you've got contractual workers, etc. Considering that there was no significant disruption of government services, how will this factor into looking at reducing the civil service size going forward across all government corporations?
I want to repeat what I just said, just so to be clear how that works. The government took a conscientious decision, and again, this is backed by international and domestic thinkers as well, that in the middle of a crisis, what it didn't want to do was exasperate a very, very bad unemployment situation by doing a radical cut to headcount. Because what you had was an economy that was teetering. And if you take those salaries out, if you take those abilities for those people to service their loans or whatnot, you are going to make a bad situation worse. So the government here in the Bahamas, other governments around in the region have, recognizing the precariousness of the economic situation, took the decision to retain the headcount. But that's to keep economic and social stability. The government could have said, listen, we send home 10,000 people, but that would have made a very bad economic situation that much worse. So for not only for the social welfare reasons, but for economic reasons, the government maintained the headcount. The strategy is, this is where the digitization comes in, is that in order to contain those costs and bring them down, as the government continues its digitization efforts, e-passports, driver's license renewals, police certificates online, what happens is the number of clerical roles that you have in your, and paperless offices, which we are pursuing now, the number of clerical roles diminish. over time, and even as the government do that, we still have years of stuff that needs to be digitized. Fortunately for the government, a lot of our staff trends older. So as these people retire from the public service, the need to backfill them with more clerical staff diminishes. That is how you can start to control contain your headcount count without necessarily having to let go vast swaths of people. So that's the strategy. The digitization, the fact that we have an aid staff will allow for attrition and not a need to replace them with additional clerical staff. So that's the broad strategy.
Is that strategy sustainable, though? Considering that all credit agencies, internal as well as some external lenders, have said that the civil service must be reduced. One study, for instance, says that we only need 7,500 people to, with the use of technology that you just mentioned, we only need 7,500 people to run these corporations, and yet we have what, over 42,000 people? So,
I'm not familiar with that study, but I can tell you that there's no credit rating agency that we talk to that recommends or suggests a radical reduction in headcount. Again, for reasons of economic stability. Let's just use a scenario. Okay, let's say we have 42,000 people. I had this question yesterday in another show, and we cut them in half because we don't need all them people. That's the argument. You don't need all these people. Why don't get rid of half? If you cut them, yeah, you could save a lot of money directly. But if you put 21,000 persons in an economy that's already suffering high unemployment, and you put them right out on the road, not only do you have a very significant social welfare problem because you have unemployed people who need to be fed and taken care of, but you also have a significant economic problem because those 21,000 salaries are now taken out of the system. These are people who go to the grocery stores, they go to the movies, they go to restaurants, and they have mortgages and obligations. When you take away their salary, all of those mortgages and obligations go into the pause, which has a significant impact on your banking sector. One of the lessons learned by the IMF and a lot of entities over the years is that even when they go into countries which are distressed, the old prescription of making radical reductions to public service headcounts has now been replaced with a more gradual move down because they actually end up making a bad situation worse by making radical reductions in expenditure, especially in an economy that's compromised. So in addition to, so let's even assume, I haven't seen that particular study, but the 7,500 is the right number. Even if a government accepts that, the question is you have to work yourself down in a way that will allow the economy to be able to absorb the people who are displaced and to ensure that you do not create a crisis of another making by a radical reduction in headcount. So those are the competing interests that you have to consider when you make an economic policy. I
get it, but how are we paying for it?
So that's the question. So the way that we pay for it in the very near term by expanding the borrowing. You would recall that again.
What?
Borrowing, by maintaining the borrowing levels. So those are the numbers I just referred to. You're doing that borrowing because you have an economy that's compromised. So the government could take one or two choices, Michelle. The government could say, listen, we will try to do our best to maintain employment and maintain the government's consumption in the economy as part of an economic stabilization program. And that's the government strategy. That's what the government said its plan was to do, to maintain, even though it curtails some expenditure, but to maintain employment as part of economic stabilization. Or the government could say, listen, we don't want to borrow this additional money in the near term. Instead, we're gonna cut half the public service, or cut a quarter of them, or cut 10,000 of them. And in so doing, you now have 10,000 additional unemployed persons, 10,000 mortgages in distress, 10,000 people who are not going to the grocery store and buying groceries, and then they have to lay off people. So you have that effect. So what the government has said is, given that it is a crisis, our fiscal strategy accommodates crises, and crises such as these require the government to put to expand borrowing in the near term with a view to stabilizing the economy. And as the economy reflates, then you scale back your economy to bring you back to balance. And that's what's laid out in the fiscal strategy report. What the implications of this unprecedented situation has caused, and what will be the steps to bring us back down towards fiscal balance. Prior to that, we were in a position of fiscal consolidation where we were reducing the deficits down. But we had Dorian, we've had this crisis, and again, the response has been to have a resilient Bahamas plan, is what it was called, that would deal with this issue. And it isn't only the Bahamas. This is what countries around the world are doing. You see it in the US, the stimulus packages, all the things they're doing is adding trillions of dollars to their deficit. In Jamaica, they're running at the deficit, Barbados. So this is something that countries have had to do to respond to an unprecedented time. The test for any future administration will be that as we emerge from this, is to go back down towards fiscal consolidation.
Are you, though, just kicking the can down the road? Is it inevitable that we will come to that place where you're going to have to make these tough decisions?
Well, again, so if the economy does not improve, if we get the situation where the pandemic lasts for 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and yes, you will get to a point where it becomes unsustainable. However, notwithstanding the situation that we're in now, where our debt to GDP has gone up from 66% of GDP to now around over 80% of GDP, we're still in a territory where things are rough, but they're not catastrophic yet. So the question is, if we're able to replay the economy toward the end of this year, let's say we start to move back towards some measure of normalcy. If the government maintains what it had been doing before, the fiscal discipline, plans for a state-owned enterprise reform, once we get back to some stable growth, then no, we won't be at any particular risk. The challenge we have, and this is what the ERC said, Michelle, the challenge we have is to get to a point of consistent, stable economic growth. If we can maintain a growth rate of 2% on average over the next decade, we get out of this without any major dislocation. If we do not, we can't sustain our economic growth. If we can't get back to part of consistent growth, then you're right. We're going to have a substantial day of reckoning down the road.
I want to read a comment. This one is again from C. Allen. It says, the radical reduction is a play on words. Reduction is encouraged nonetheless. Where is the strategy for the economic shift of the workforce into the new economic models? Gradual shift will only agitate the current economic status. How do you respond to that?
I don't agree with my good friend C. Allen. If you make a radical shift, again, what does that mean? I don't know what that terminology means, but let me assume what he's saying. If we take the workforce that we have today, and you want 10,000 public servants, and you want to move them to do something else, that is not something you could do at a hairpin. You lay them off. What do? Do you disengage them? And even if the plan is to get them into working into another industry or environment, there is a substantial transition time where they have to upskill, where they have to get a new job and do all of those sorts of things. The time period from which the point you disengage them to the time that they're re-engaged, you will put an economy that's compromised in an even worse situation. Again, what I'm saying isn't Marlon speaking. This is what it is around the world, and again, it goes back to the lesson I told you, what other jurisdictions have learned, what the IMF and all of those have learned. When there is reform that is necessary for economic and social stability, the work has to be done in a very gradual and sustained way. Radical movements, we as intellectuals could talk ourselves dizzy about that, but you have to do it in a way that ensures that you maintain social and economic stability. Otherwise, you lose any potential benefit of any reform effort. If people are hungry, if people don't have the job, if the banking system, if mortgages and loans go into arrears, all of those considerations have to be considered as part of any sort of plan, if it is to be successful and sustainable.
All right, I want to read one more comment and then we are going to go to a break. Siobhan says, MPs and government staff need to consider salary reduction during this time. And please, no more borrowing, for heaven's sake. What is the purpose of the value-added tax increase? And when are we going to get a Freedom of Information Act implemented in this country? I thought this F&M government ran on transparency. Still waiting. Now, I know you can't respond from the political side, but from the side that you can respond, how do you respond?
On the borrowing, again, the government. So if the government doesn't borrow, the question is, what are the alternatives? So that's a very good point she makes. If the government says, you know what, as of tomorrow, we're not going to borrow a penny more. That, again, goes back to the point I just made. Then you have to have radical cuts in expenditures. So, if you cut the civil service wage bill by 10%, that's $40 million. That may be something to be considered. If you cut out all the MPs and ministers' salaries, you may save yourself $2 million. But that doesn't solve the problem. The issue is if you now decide you are not going to borrow a penny, you're taking out all of that consumption, not just on salaries, but on all the government goods and services it procures in the economy that it buys from Bahamian businesses and Bahamian entrepreneurs. You take that out of the economy, what do you think the impact would be? So this is why the Bahamas Jamaica, Barbados, United States, Canada, Britain, and virtually almost all countries of the world took the decision during the pandemic to increase their borrowing in order to try to maintain economic and social stability. We can, at a stroke of a pen, not we, I can't do it, but a government and parliament can, at a stroke of a pen, decide to radically cut spending because the revenue isn't there. But I can assure you, the level of social and economic dislocation would be counterproductive in the name of trying to avoid borrowing. What jurisdictions have to do is to try to level it out, to accept that in crisis situations, you do have to ramp up your borrowing substantially, but you do need a plan that could get you back down towards balance. And again, I encourage the folks here to read the fiscal strategy report that outlines what the government's plan is over time to bring us back down towards fiscal consolidation.
Well, Graham Weatherford has a comment, and I believe he believes that this is the solution to your question as to if we don't borrow, what do we do? His comment is, why will we not tax the $3 trillion in goods and services? Your response.
So I thank Graham for that question. I think what Graham is referring to is particularly the offshore sector, what we call the offshore sector. And the answer to that, Graham, is if a substantial amount of that value is in deposits that sit in the Bahamian dollar account. So what I think Graham and others have suggested is, why not just put a tax on that? Why not put a 2% tax on that? The answer is, when you announce that, before you get a chance to do it, because you have to go to Parliament to announce it. The government can't do it in secret. Once any government announces that it will put a tax on those assets that appear as part of our offshore sector, those assets at a click of a mouse will disappear to another jurisdiction tomorrow. So that is the answer to that question. So by the time you implement the tax, the assets won't be here anymore, because those are assets that are moved electronically. And so any liquid asset would just simply move. So that I hope that answers. Graham brings this point up over and over. I've seen other people try to attempt to answer it, but that's the answer, Graham. If your government attempts to tax those liquid assets, those assets will just simply move to Bermuda, the Cayman, somewhere else where they would not be subject to that particular tax. So that's the answer to that question.
Well, there is one thing that we do have that provides an advantage for us, and it's proximity to the United States. There are some things that have to pass through our territory, and I do believe that we are missing opportunities by not taxing these things. They don't have a choice but to pass through our territory. So what is your response to that?
Things like such as, you mean aerospace, the ships and the vessels?
Ships, vessels, all of the cabling that is necessary for communication. There's so many things.
All right, so for cabling, the cabling is an easy bypass, because cabling, they just move. So we can't, cables that need to come into the Bahamas for us to communicate, you can make an argument about that but if it's just to move it past, they will find another route. If the taxes don't work out.
That's easier said. They have to come through the Bahamas. To be cost effective, they have to come through the Bahamas.
Not necessarily, no.
Go around.
I used to work in telecoms. I know the answer to that question. So no, the Bahamas, remember now, we sit kind of out there. The closest point to move past us to go to Florida is to get to down south. They can bypass us. They can go and land across it, because those cable networks are mature now. Maybe there was a time when they do it, but because cables are interconnected, you could switch right now today and Miami and get to some point in the Caribbean without ever having to traverse the Bahamas with the click of a mouse, because of the way that the cables, the topography of the cables today. And they do that for resiliency. So if the cable breaks, they can just move the traffic. So no, they don't have to pass through the Bahamas. But on the ships, that is something that successive governments have been exploring. And what I think the answer to that is we have to make sure whatever we do, our conventions around sea passage, because there's laws of the sea that allows passage. So those are the kinds of things that we are looking at, and then there may be some opportunity for. But even if those are successful, those are marginal gains. Those aren't the kinds of things that really, round the board. Maybe a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. The other big one is the aerospace. And as you could see, that was started very successfully by the former administration, that's been picked up by the current administration, is to facilitate that transition, which should happen during the upcoming fiscal year, to allow us to be able to benefit more from our aerospace, to be able to do it for those things that traverse the Bahamas. So yeah, that's a good point. There are opportunities there for sure. but not opportunities that would make a material change in our fiscal outcomes. They provide us certainly with some income, but they won't allow us to make some radical shifts.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back on the other side, I want to talk about post-COVID recovery, and what is being done to prepare us for the new reality, which will be a jobless recovery. Stay with us. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. You're watching GPS.
Glory 93.9 FM. We're chasing after God's glory.
Stop letting these other guys run you hot while looking for ice. No need to check the food store, the gas station, conveniently located around Nassau. Cooler Ice. So for just $3 you can get a bag of ice whenever you want, or refill your 5-gallon bottle for the same $3. The ice machine is closer than you know. Cooler Ice. With locations at Arawak Key, Potters Key Dock, Montague Boat Ramp, Superwash locations at Prince Charles, Carmichael Road, Soldier Road, Charles Saunders Highway, and 3 new locations: Superwash Nassau Street, Wolf Road, and Gibbs Corner. Cooler Ice Bahamas. Fresh and ready whenever you are.
Looking for an extraordinary junior high school with caring, qualified staff and affordable tuition? Then come visit us at Elite School of Excellence, an affiliate of First Step Academy. ABECA-focused and Ministry of Education approved, we foster discipline, integrity, and wisdom while molding our students for success. Call us at 341-8846 or stop by First Step Academy Schools on Fire Trail and Soldy Roads for more information.
Executive Printers is your one-stop shop for all your branding and customization needs. Letterheads, envelopes, business cards, invoices, share and gift certificates, rubber stamps, vouchers, funeral programs, brochures, flyers, banners, and promotional items like mugs, water bottles, mouse pads, and key rings, all with personable service and great quality. No project is too small or too large. For great turnaround and competitive pricing, make an executive decision. Call us at 393-5011.
Escape from the city life to Bacon Air Beach Resort in Pirateswell, Mayaguana. Relax in one of 16 air-conditioned rooms just steps away from the ocean. Enjoy scrumptious dishes in our waterfront dining room. Sip on a tropical cocktail, or if you must, stay connected with wireless internet. Nestled on one of the most beautiful beaches in the Bahamas, Bacon Air Beach Resort offers a unique vacation experience. For reservations, call 339-3726 or 463-0182.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 hyperimmune egg powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
And welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm. My guest today is Marlon Johnson, and we are discussing Money Matters, the state of the economy. We would love to hear from you. Our telephone line is 828-3543, 828-3543 is the number to call, and 828-2543 is the text line, 828-2543. And of course, you can put a comment on Facebook, and we will pick through a couple of them and put them on the air. Now, if you decide to call in, I want you now. Don't be running on long, because we got a lot of ground to cover, and I'm not going to let you all eat up all this precious time that we have with Mr. Johnson on the show today. All right, so let me read a comment. And I'm sorry I keep picking on C. Allen's comments, but his comments are too good. It says, if we are to adopt an actual 21st century-based digital economic strategy, not only would those who have cable built again, not only would those who have cable build again, but we would attract trillions in data jurisdictional location in the Bahamas. They are dressing up a dead animal and spraying perfume and saying it's better, better, better. How do you respond to that?
Thank you, C. Allen, for your commentary and perspective. I always appreciate C. Allen's perspective on things. So thanks. I don't agree with this assessment, but I'm happy we have persons like him who consistently provide his perspective.
All right. Let's turn our attention to post-COVID recovery. Bottom line is the economy was shut down. We all know that, not like you pointed out, not just here in the Bahamas, but around the world. But here in the Bahamas is what we're talking about today. So we saw our economy shut down, and many businesses were not able to survive that. Some of them closed, others are hanging on by a thread. Many had to reduce the size of their staff. They had to make adjustments. And so for those that do survive and are able to reopen, many of them have had to reconfigure and rethink the way they do business to face this new reality. So what is being done to create new jobs to replace those that are not coming back?
Well, I think I don't want to preempt. That will be a topic of discussion in the budget that's coming up at the end of May. May 26th, the Prime Minister will read the budget and will talk about the government's economic plans specifically. However, generally, I think a couple of things. I think that augur in our favor. One of the things is that we do have a significant pipeline of projects that are imminent to be opened up. So, for example, we have the Point project that will be brand new and certainly ready to open in business. That'll add a particular boost, not only employment, but actually in the revitalization of downtown. We do have the wind project here in Cable Beach. That again, certainly by the early next year, I imagine, will be in a position where it'll be opening, and that'll create some employment. We have the port projects, the downtown port project that again is to create a destination for downtown, and again help to revitalize that downtown area. You have the Disney project, you have the Carnival in Grand Bahama. You do have the project that's still intended to go over there with the property in Grand Bahama. So one of the good news is that, and I think it speaks to the confidence that people have in the Bahamas, not in any one administration. I think I always say this. I think people have to realize that the confidence in the Bahamas has stemmed from the fact that we've had, a very stable, predictable political and economic environment, and that we transition governments very seamlessly. So that even in the election, if the election comes and the government changes, we do so in a way that's peaceful and so that investors have confidence in our country. So that augurs well for us, that we won't see a reopen of the economy with no new prospects. Your point is well made, though. I think one of the new realities we all have to face into is that the way of doing work will change. And I think what we have said in the Economic Recovery Committee is we have to your point, we have to figure out how better to utilize the fact that we are a destination of choice. People want to domicile here. People want to work from here. They want to set up here and set up the operations here. So I think that creates an immediate opportunity that we have to better leverage. How do we get people to come and work from the Bahamas and set up the operations in the Bahamas in a digital environment? Because they want to take advantage. They want to take advantage of that. I think the second thing we do is there will be substantial pent-up demand for travel. So what I know some of my friends doing, what I've seen other people doing, is they are preparing themselves for what happens when the country reopens. There will be a demand, we believe, for people who want to come and vacation. Who have on vacation will be 2 years. And again, the shared economy is one of those areas where I think that it has substantial opportunity. And then finally, what do we do as part of the diversification front? The ERC made the case that we've been talking since I was a boy and probably before about diversifying into agriculture and fisheries, better exploiting the green economy, better exploiting the blue economy. And our contention was that the government has to be focused and deliberate in that activity. It has to state these are the crops, these are the fishery stocks, these are the things that we will focus on. And then we have to leverage our resources behind them. Because there's great interest on the part of some to get into interesting ways to farm, interesting ways to fish. But I think a critique generally has been that we've been too diffuse in our efforts. We need to be focused and deliberate to stand behind that so that we truly create some niche opportunities in a way that can absorb some of the displaced labor that we will see. It will take us some time, Michelle, to get back. There really no country, I think, can wave a magic wand and emerge from this. But I think we do have to be very deliberate and focused in how we emerge from this and explore some of those things in a very, very focused way. Those are some of the observations that came out of the ERC that we presented it out.
Well, based on our existing model, the government really is, it looks for its revenue from spend. So in other words, VAT is a good example. But if you have a decreased workforce, then there's less people spending money, so there's less VAT to collect. So,
So again, that's why we have to do a better. One of the things that certainly came clear here, and we're going to study this in depth because we're doing a tax diagnostic. But I estimate that probably 25 cents out of every VAT dollar we earn is earned from visitors to the Bahamas. So that puts us in a really ideal situation. Our economic model has some disadvantages, but one of the advantages it has is that a lot of the consumption in the economy are by people who visit it. So a lot of our tax base is paid by people coming from offshore. Why is that helpful in the recovery? It goes back to the point I made earlier. If we have people who want to come here, who want to spend time here, who want to live here, work from here, and not have to necessarily work in here, not have to displace Bahamians who employ. If you get them here and you get them consuming, you're now replacing and expanding your tax base without you having to make any material investment. So there is that opportunity. That's an immediate opportunity that we can do, I think, a much better job in getting those persons in the near term to deal with some of that displaced workforce. But I don't believe that even though our unemployment numbers will be elevated for some time, the points I just raised about the continued interest in investment domestically and from foreign investors, I think will allow our economy to reflate in a fairly healthy way. And if we do the things we need to do around the Invest Bahamas model and some of those other things to make it easier for people to get in business and provide the capital support to entrepreneurs, we can claw back a lot of those lost jobs, I believe, in a fairly near term.
That's a lot of folks going to have to come in to make that, to have a.
But Michelle, we're not. If you again go back to our fiscal strategy report, we're not expecting. Let me finish. We're not expecting the numbers to recover right away. So we have built in the fact that there will be. If we lost 16% of our economic growth, it takes us several years to build that back, and all that's built in to what you see projected there. It isn't predicated upon us coming back.
We have a caller on the line that's been holding on for over 2 minutes. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
When Mr. Marlon Johnson and the government speak about investment, they always lean to the foreign investor. And this is one of the things what the talk show personalities, persons who call into the talk shows, real Bahamian sovereigns who listen in right now to this show, would argue why the Bahamian people have argued for ownership of our economy. Ownership do not necessarily have to be on the greater level of which they're ready to start World War III or IV for over, but ownership in the sense of Bahamianization, that when these foreigners that Mr. Marlon Johnson speak about, when the government, the cabinet, who are bringing in or at least signing off on these people coming in, that the government, the cabinet, that will recognize and cause these people to recognize that Bahamian people, have ownership in this country and should benefit equally. The equity should be balance. You understand, Mr. Marlon Johnson? And so when you start to speak as if you're trying to send owners of the country, people who own this country, to work for some foreigner, then all I'm saying to you, if since that's the argument you all have brought in the last 48 independent years, then I'm telling you, World War IV is cheaper World War IV start if you're telling people like Amos and C. Allen Johnson and Graham Welford and others and Miss McIntosh, Ali McIntosh, people like that, even the DNA leader and others, that we supposed to go work for foreigner and take the trickle down effect that Brenton speak about. That is absolute garbage. I need Great Britain and America, the two superpower of the West, to comprehend the triangle is the ownership, Bahamian ownership with America and with Great Britain.
Okay,
you
Amos.
are now talking about China.
Okay, Amos.
But you know what the Americans can invest billions in this country.
All right, Amos. I told you all, don't be running on long. All right, go ahead and respond. Respond to that.
So thanks, Amos. So let me recalibrate and hopefully make the point. I don't think I said in your show, I don't remember saying in any show previous, that there ought to be a preference for foreign investment over Bahamians, or that Bahamians ought to.
Well, there ought not to be, but for all intents and purposes, we all know that there seems to be.
Okay, let's accept that premise that there seems to be. I started the show and I repeated several times. A key part of developing Bahamian ownership is not just talking about Bahamian ownership, but you cannot have ownership without capital. So a key part of unlocking that Bahamian ownership is by putting money behind the prospect for Bahamian ownership. So it is getting and this is anyone, and you know, I've been an entrepreneur before, you've been an entrepreneur before. A lot of people listening know what a challenge it is, to do business in the Bahamas and B, to raise capital. So if we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and Bahamian ownership, we got to start from a model of capital, access to capital. So that is, and I already had a discussion, so I don't want to rehash it. So a key focus must be that we expand opportunities for Bahamians to access capital, not just loan capital, but like I said, grants and equity as well. So I just want that to be abundantly clear. We are talking about Bahamian ownership. So that's point one. The second point, in the broader sense, in order for us to better leverage what we do have, which is extremely valuable crown land and other natural resources, we need a mechanism of sorts, a sovereign wealth fund, an investment fund that will allow Bahamians collectively, as owners of the fund, and individually to leverage those resources to create economic opportunity. His point is well made. We can't have a successful economy unless there's deliberate ways to expand Bahamian ownership. And then we got to think about more, how do we expand those Bahamian companies which have reached a point of maturity we need more an expanded Bahamian stock market and mechanisms for people to be able to access capital through junior stock markets, through mature stock markets, so that Bahamians, even if they are people who want to be employees, because not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, they still have easy and simple means to invest in actual productive assets. So that premise is absolutely sound. The premise must start there. But all successful countries have policies that encourage both domestic investment and quality foreign investment. I always tell people, show me the country that's successful that doesn't have a very open, robust international investment regime. And people have a hard time finding it. So you need both. You need to have a strong focus on domestic investment, but you need to have an equally strong focus on quality international investment if you want your country to prosper and if you want your ownership opportunities to expand. It need not be an either or dichotomy.
All right. Considering the confession of Kay Forbes Smith and Pakeisha Parker Edgecombe that no significant repairs were made since Dorian, specifically I'm talking about the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama, where will the money come from to get the repairs done?
I'm not familiar with those quotes. What I do know is that true, the government means that there's been, I guess, somewhat well over $50 million, probably close to $80 million spent in public monies to support the repairs to the water plant and the electricity plant. We do know that there have been hundreds of millions of dollars, although not directly related to us. We do know that there's been hundreds of millions of dollars flowed in private insurance that has funded the repair of a lot of the private businesses and residences on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. I'm not familiar with those specific comments, but I do know this, and there was and there is quite a bit of construction activity going on in those islands. A portion of the government's capital budget has gone to fix the public buildings in those islands. So those islands are being repaired, and some of the facilities restored.
It seems at a snail's pace, Marlon. If you travel to those islands, you're wondering what is going on. It's I hear what you're saying in terms of where money was spent, but you're not. For the most part, it doesn't. You're not seeing it on the ground. It still looks like a disaster zone, particularly Abaco. And so, a lot of people are asking this question: what happened to all that money that was earmarked for Dorian recovery in the first place, from both government and external donations? Where did all that money go?
The money is in the external. I think we ended up getting around $15 million in donations. And the report on that will be forthcoming. That information is there. It's collected. We had tens of, as is the case generally, there are tens of millions of dollars pledged, but the difference between pledge and what is actually delivered. The money on the budgetary side has been spent and largely in part to restore the critical infrastructure, the electricity and the water works. That is where the substantial share of the public investment has gone in. There has been some repairs and reconstruction of some of the public facilities. But the drivers in those islands will be in the private sector. And so those persons who have private insurance coverage certainly have gotten their proceeds and they are rebuilding. I think one of the things that we have to find a way to do better in the Bahamas is to ensure we have better, fuller coverage on residences and the like. A lot of times, and this is no knock on persons, so I'm not giving a judgment call. One of the challenges that all governments face is once we have a significant hurricane event, the only people who end up having insurance are people who have mortgages. A lot of us, once we get past that mortgage, and because the mortgage requires you to have insurance, people tend to drop their insurance. So we still have a large number of private residences which are not insured and then which have to rely on the government for assistance. There is a program, the Small Home Grant, where millions of dollars have been spent, but that is moving, I agree, very slowly because that's just based on availability. And the initial funds have been exhausted. And the like that. But what we have to find a way to do collectively as a country is find a way to ensure that people keep their home insurance even after their mortgages are paid, so that the rebuilding effort could be that much more robust and that much quicker.
All right.
So finally, and on top of that too, I want to say to you, you'll see again in the fiscal strategy report, Michelle, and this has been raised over and over, we also need a way to create a disaster recovery fund. And an interesting way because recommendations were made by the IMF and others that 0.5% of our GDP, around $100 million a year, should be set aside in a fund. So I think part of the solution we need to look at as a country is recognizing we will be hit by hurricane. We need to start to put together a fund and fund it so that we're in a position to have the access to capital to quickly go in and refurbish and repair.
And speaking of which, the fact that we will be hit by hurricanes, we're still grappling with the fact that there's much more work to be done on those islands that were hit by Dorian. We're about to go into another hurricane season in a matter of a couple of weeks. And so you're talking about the potential damage on top of damage. So we're faced with some very serious questions as to our preparedness.
Yeah, so we had a situation where we came out of Dorian and then we ran right into the pandemic. So the resources that would have been there otherwise will of course evaporated because of the pandemic. So we're in a you're absolutely correct. We're in a very precarious situation. And again, part of the conversation coming out of this now is how do we as a country make ourselves more resilient in how we construct and how we set aside resources and how we incentivize insurance. I always say to folks, if I'm holding a mortgage and as a part of that mortgage, I'm able to afford home insurance and pay my mortgage, certainly when my mortgage is finished, I should have enough money to be able to continue on my insurance. So what we have to figure out is a way creatively to ensure that people who own properties, who own physical properties, keep them the insurance coverage certainly for hurricane events. And if that pool expands, actually it brings down everybody else's costs as well because it's a bigger pool. So I think that's part of the national conversation we have to have is how do we ensure we have adequate insurance coverage for what will be an eventuality at some point we will be hit by a major storm.
Is the government preparing in the new budget to deal with the Dorian effect and preparation for the new hurricane season at the same time?
Yes.
Can you expand?
I can't preempt what's going in the budget, but yes, so those considerations will be in the budget, yes.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Considering that COVID will probably be with us for a long time, what resources will be used to fund a sustained COVID economy, and where are those resources coming from?
So, well, I'm hoping COVID isn't with us for a very long period
It
of
will
time.
be, Marlon. Let's be real. It will be.
So, no, we will have the SARS COVID-19 virus with us probably for forever, but we're not going to be hopefully in a pandemic forever. So the question we got to figure out is how do we now transition? And because we are in as you said, it's a combination of things. We got to make sure that we're healthier. We got to understand that it may be eventually that we need to have booster shots every year, like we do with the flu and the like, to keep us covered, to avoid another epidemic locally or pandemic globally. And we will have to make sure that our healthcare system is that much more robust. So I think you will see in the new budget allocations specifically targeted about strengthening the healthcare sector and healthcare segment, with the understanding that certainly COVID-related expenditure will continue to be with us for a while.
Let's talk about that expenditure. Money will be needed for let's say 1 million vaccines. Because you're talking, y'all say y'all want to vaccinate the entire population. Now you're talking about booster shots after the person is fully vaccinated, and then vaccines after that every year. We also have to look at our hospitals and their ability to handle the cases that will be coming to them. We see now we're having a problem in that area. Considering the fact that we are an archipelago, we have to be able to respond to both Bahamians and visitors on our family islands who may need some assistance when it comes to this whole idea of COVID-19. I mean, we just saw a Bimonite who died waiting to be transported to New Providence. So, what is there a plan in place that will address those specific unique needs?
So on the near term, we have had for many years now running over successive administrations an air ambulance service that at the expense of the taxpayer picks up people who are critically ill and bring them to the home, bring them to either New Providence or Grand Bahama, where there's capabilities. So the short answer is we need to strengthen the healthcare sector. We need to modernize. Our hospital is many years, decades, I guess, due for a substantial upgrade. So I think there has to be resources put there. We need to make sure that our remote clinics are able to deal with sort of pandemic-induced emergencies, equipped with oxygen and the like, to be able to take care of people who become critically ill. As I said, the nature, we don't know yet how long the COVID vaccines will be effective, but it is likely, given the amount of variants that have emerged, that we will need to budget for the possibility of booster shots on an annual basis. If we do that, and if we get substantial take-up, then the need for us to see spikes where people get seriously ill should diminish. And as you point out, we got to move, even outside of COVID. Your point is very well made. We have to move to put more resources and incentives around a wellness program. Now, when you look at a wellness program, the question you got to ask is, if we can see that human beings work on an incentive and disincentive system, the question is, what do you do, or what do we do to incentivize people to be healthy and to disincentivize them from the kinds of activities and diets that make them unhealthy in the first place?
As somebody who is a health coach, I can tell you what my experience has been to answer that question. People are very incentivized because they don't want to get COVID. And so a lot of people who wasn't checking for health before. Oh, yeah, whatever, Michelle. Now they calling me. Oh, what would you? I did. So people are incentivized. People now understand the importance of being healthy in this COVID environment.
Right. So, and that is the kind. So those are the combinations of things that need to happen. And like I said, I think you will see in the budget substantial attention paid to the improvement in the healthcare space.
All right. One more question, and then we have to take a break. And then I want to turn my attention to well, let me just ask this question first. What types of arrangements are being made? We obviously are in a housing crisis where a lot of people, because of the shutdown of the economy, have lost their jobs. Some people living out of cars. We have a housing crisis. So what type of arrangements are being made to address this crisis? Is the government preparing a fiscal response? And can you tell us anything more than just yes?
Fiscal response to what, sorry?
The housing crisis that we are now dealing with.
But in the immediate term, people who are facing housing difficulties can apply actually to social services for assistance. So if, for instance, they need rent money or whatnot, there is an allocation and people have applied successfully. So that's already built into the budgetary expenditure. There's a line item in there for that assistance. And so persons can make application now. More broadly on housing, I think what the PM, I'm not speaking of the school, has already said, is that the intention of expanding the sort of facility in place now that was done in Carmichael and done in Foxhill and now announced here out west is to try to make lots, subsidized lots more available so that Bahamians of more modest means can actually afford a decent house, because that's been part of the issue. Land values have gone up so much so over the last decade, 2 decades, to take it out of reach. So the long-term or medium-term strategy is to expand the subsidized lot program so that people can now actually afford decent property and leverage the value of the subsidy as equity to be able to build again. We're working also with the banks and the financial institutions because there are some things that have to be untangled there to get the mortgage portfolio flowing again and get people the mortgages. Because again, you give them the land, that still doesn't help. They can't access financing. One of the other interesting things we've done in the Ministry of Finance, we're looking at the distressed properties. We don't have a very liquid housing market here in the Bronx. So one of the things we are very actively looking at is how can we take distressed properties and get people in there. So what are the things? There's some interesting things. Again, I don't want to preempt what the policymakers will say, but there's some interesting things where you can take distressed properties and turn them fairly quickly to places where people can live, even if a person can't come up with a down deposit, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the kinds of things that we're looking at to try to deal with what is the housing crunch here, especially in the province.
All right. We have to take a break. When we come back on the other side, are we borrowing money to pay bills? If so, are we going to end up in the hands of the finance man? Are we in danger of that? Very serious questions coming up. Stay with us. This is GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Ocean blue is the best in seafood, hey, hey. Fresh out the water and affordable too, yeah. We got fish, conch, lobster, shrimp, everything you want, Ocean Blue got it. Ocean Blue, friendly and clean, best service you ever seen. Ocean Blue is the best in seafood, yeah. Fresh out the water and affordable too, yeah. Ocean Blue Seafood, we are here for you. Ocean Blue Seafood, no one else will do. Ocean Blue Seafood, located on Burnett Road. Contact us at 393-2160.
At the Shirley Street Plaza, you'll find Le Petit Gourmet, a small cafe that's big on flavor. Handcrafted delights made with love will not only please your palate, but feed your soul. Call us at 394-1251. 8 to 12 minutes is all it takes for a burglar to rob your home or business. Security Systems International provides professional and affordable solutions for both. Call 396-5000 for your customized quote. Gwen's Alterations provides professional services for all your tailoring needs, including face masks to keep you safe and in style. A stitch in time saves 9. So call us today at 393-6227.
For all your building needs, it's Carib Construction and Project Management on Gladstone Road. We build it all. Schools, homes, hotels, and more, including structures requiring a Phase 3 electrical contractor. We also provide project management services. The first step towards your dream building begins at Carib Construction and Project Management. Call us at 376-1556 or 341-4466.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system. with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Longevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting sugar-free berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm Michelle Malcolm talking to Marlon Johnson, the Financial Secretary, about the state of our economy. And I want to now turn our attention in the last 14 minutes of this show to this excessive borrowing. Clearly we are in a position where we haven't to borrow to pay bills. And if I were to do that as an individual, you all would say I am not good at managing my money. We see where many civil servants are complaining that they can't get paid what is owed to them in time. We see now where 3 islands are about to face a water crisis because, according to Aqua Designs Bahamas, the government owes them millions of dollars and has expressed no interest in renewing their contracts. It seems that we are in a bind financially, and we have to turn now to the money lenders to get us out of this bind. Are we broke?
So let me, you characterize it as excessive borrowing, right?
It's not?
You said, no. For reasons that I hope I spent the last hour and a half doing. And then you try to make a parallel, Michelle, to personal or corporate finance. So you're right. If we were an individual or if we were a company, then we wouldn't take this strategy. So if we were a company and we were facing losses, or we were a household facing losses, then what we would then do is we would scale back expenditure. We would scale back what we do in order so that we can now move back to a balanced position. That's what you would do if you, as a business or an individual. That's accepted. The error in that thinking, though, is that it makes a parallel between a sovereign country and its responsibilities and an individual or a business. It isn't the same. I labored unsuccessfully, I can see, to try to explain to you why you can't do that. If the government took the decision that it would simply scale back expenditure because its revenue now has been cut by 30, 40%, what it would have done, what it would do, it would exasperate a very, very bad situation.
Marlon, I get it.
Yeah, no, but you can't, but you then can't say you get that and then turn around and say, well, the government is engaging in excessive borrowing, because those two conversations don't line up. If the government had scaled back, let me finish. If the government had scaled back its expenditure, it would have meant that it would have had to either cut staff or certainly cut a lot of its contracts and contractual obligations to the suppliers, vendors, and the like. Though the effects of that would have mean that people, when the government cut staff, not only those people don't have the money to spend, all of their loans and stuff to both big banks and small lenders would go into arrears, and those people would then have to lay off people. All of the groceries they buy, the people employed. Michelle, you gotta let me finish the point. All of the people who were employed by those persons would have gone off. So it would have caused the economy to deteriorate even further. So okay, but if you can't then understand that and then come back and say the government is spending excessively, the government is spending in a way so that to ensure that the economy does not crater.
I understand that you've justified why, but that doesn't change the fact of the billions of dollars that have been borrowed.
No, but billions of dollars. But you're saying billions of dollars. That is correct. But then you characterize it as excessive. I would say I wouldn't characterize it as excessive. I would characterize it as necessary. And that isn't just Marlon speaking. That is any informed observer who would say that the government had to do that in order to maintain the economy. It wasn't excessive, but it was necessary. It's high. It's elevated. It's much higher than any of us would like.
Okay, we get it. Are we broke? Answer the question.
No, we are not broke. In fact, one of the things that because in a very open way, the government said, listen, this is going to be we have an unparalleled economic crisis. We have to match it with unparalleled financing. Because we did that, it puts us in a position to meet our obligations. There are times, as there's been historically, from I started in the public service in 1991 as a young economist to now, where we have done a poor job of just paying people on time. So, and you're right. So there are people who go without getting paid. There are vendors who take long to get paid and the like. That is certainly true. And we certainly had a situation with some of our state-owned enterprises where they, like in the government, the cash has been very constrained. So it's a constrained environment. That isn't new. That has been a reality when the government has money, when the government doesn't have money. But I can assure you that we are managing, the Ministry of Finance is managing the affairs in a way that allows us to meet our obligations. That's why it got the Borrowing Authority that it did.
So let me ask you this. If this is not what broke looks like, what does broke look like to you?
Again, this is how you're defining broke. Broke meaning that we are insolvent, or broke meaning that we're in a financial tight spot. If it's broke meaning that we're in a financial tight spot, that's correct. But every day we collect somewhere between $4 and $10 million in revenue. So we have cash flow to allow us to meet our commitments. And the truth of the matter is, as we are in an economic crisis, you're right, we're in a very, very tight fiscal situation. My PS colleagues could tell you I preach to that every day. Yes, things are tight, but no, we're not in a situation where we're insolvent. Far from it. We are meeting our core obligations. Absolutely.
Have we had any pressure from the IMF or IDB with regard to our financial status?
So again, an IMF has never in the history of the IMF, from what I know, pressured anybody. That's not the IMF rule. We are members and shareholders of the IMF and the IDB. So we're sitting in an owner seat. They don't pressure countries. People go to the IMF if they have balance of payment challenges and they can't raise financing, or even if they can, if they want to go in a different direction, they will get access the IMF financing as a borrowing member of the IMF. So no international entity puts pressure or has ever put pressure in anything that I'm aware of on any government here or anywhere else. That does not happen. It is not happening. So no.
Are there talks currently going on now with the IMF as it relates to, or IDB as it relates to this additional borrowing that you've been talking about? Are they in the conversation?
When you say in the conversation,
are we talking to them about borrowing money from them?
So the IDB, yes. The IDB and the CDB, we're borrowing members of those entities, so we are in constant dialogue with them about getting loan financing. We're working through a number of loan financing operations with the IDB presently, and we anticipate that there will be another loan operation closed with them before the end of the fiscal year. That was laid out, and that is part of the borrowing envelope approved by Parliament.
What kind of interest rates are we talking about in these proposed discussions?
Excellent question. So part of the reason that we as a shareholder member go to the IDB and the CDB is because we get interest rates from them that are, because they're non-profit entities that are owned by us and the other borrowing members, we get interest rates that are far superior. So generally speaking, from the IDB, we pay interest rates of somewhere between 2 to 3%. When we borrow in the open market, those rates right now, given our situation, could be as high as 8, 9%. So, and we get tenors from them that could be as high as 20 years. So you get with a 5-year principal grace period. So we borrow from the entities that we own because they're able to provide us loans on concessionary terms. And very often it's accompanied with grants that help us implement whatever the programs that we are. And we get that because we are owner members of these entities.
Are our reserves stable?
Not only are they stable, they're near historic highs. One of the things that has happened was the government, the former DPM, as he outlined in the budget last year, said that the government would undertake a sizable portion of its debt financing this year in foreign currency. What that has enabled the government to do is, whereas at the time we had forecasted that even with this foreign borrowing, we had anticipated that the foreign reserves would run down to about $1 billion. Right now, our foreign reserves still sit at close to $2 billion, which is higher than it was in a pre-Dorian, pre-pandemic situation. So one of the outcomes of that strategy is to ensure that our foreign reserves are at extraordinarily healthy levels and that our dollar is far, far away from being at risk at all.
Well, that was my next
So,
question. How are dollars currently standing up to the US dollar, and are we at risk for devaluation?
well, again, when you have historically high foreign reserves, higher than it's ever been in terms of weeks of import cover, or near those terms, our dollar is as strong as it has ever been. We are at no risk, zero risk of any default. And again, that is informed by, on occasion, by the strategy of the government to borrow in foreign currency during this particular period. So no, you can assure your listeners, because I hear rumors. You have one of your loyal listeners sent me a question this morning. Oh, we hearing the IMF and the IDB to let us know more money, and so you have all of this nonsense perpetrated by the risk when it is just totally alien to any of the facts. And they don't have to take Marlon's word for it. They can read the central bank reports, they can read the IMF reports, they can read the IDB information that's online. So fortunately for us, that notwithstanding the economic calamity that we're in front of, the country from a fiscal standpoint has fared, and a monetary standpoint has fared as well as could be expected in circumstances.
And yet I have heard financial, well-respected financial experts in the country who are sounding the alarm that we are on a financial cliff. We're on the edge. And they are concerned that we real close to toppling over. You're sitting here and you're making it sound like, everything is wonderful and fine, and you just.
So let me correct you. No, everything isn't wonderful and fine. But I challenge them to come forward and provide the empirical evidence to back up that assertion. On what grounds are they speaking? Is it that the reserves are running down? Well, that's not true. That ain't Marlon saying that. The central bank says that. So unless they're assuming that the central bank is lying, the evidence is there. If the issue is that, well, we're not able to meet our obligations, government is paying its bills. So when they say we are at a financial cliff, what I think you are hearing is an anticipation that given everything that's around, things must be dire. The situation is serious. I don't want to sugarcoat that. I don't want to pretend as if everything is all fine and everything is a great place. We still have tens of thousands of people unemployed. Our revenues are still down materially. We are in a rough patch, Michelle. Nobody's discounting that. But being in a rough patch and being moments away from catastrophe are two separate things. And I think we can have a conversation where we can acknowledge that, yeah, revenues are substantially down. Expenditure, the government having to find $140 million in unemployment assistance, having to provide $30 million in food assistance, puts severe pressures on expenditure. But again, the system has been robust enough. This is testament to 50 years of appropriate macro fiscal management of the economy. It allows us to be able to weather this particular situation.
All right. Well, I hope that once we get more details in this forthcoming budget communication, I hope that you will agree to come back on the show and answer a couple of questions for us that you weren't able to answer today.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you back. All right. Thank you so much, Marlon, for your time. I know you're a very busy man, and I appreciate you taking out a couple of hours to be with us here today and answer a couple of questions. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And I want to say thank you, too, and I appreciate the questions, the tough questions, and the critique. It's absolutely critical for our democracy that we're able to have these kinds of discussions and you're able to have your very valuable input into the public discourse. So thank you, too.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, too. All right.
All right, that's it, guys. Time is gone. I'm Michelle Malcolm. A big, huge thanks to Marlon Johnson, Financial Secretary, for making himself available to discuss money matters with us today, the state of the Bahamian economy. I guess we'll have to wait and see as it relates to some of the questions that he could not answer as to what will be presented to us in the budget communication, which is going to be coming up in June. So we will all stand by for that. That's going to do it for the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tomorrow is TGIF. It's going to be an open line show where we give you an opportunity to get off your chest whatever is on your mind. Always looking forward to that. I'm Michelle Malcolm. Thanks so much for tuning in. A huge thanks to our sponsors for making today's show possible. Have a good afternoon, everyone.